afternoon. First of all, sorry I missed last week for a family thing, but Dave Weil, who spoke last week, said that you were all very welcoming. So thank you for that. He really enjoyed coming up and speaking. So today we have Brian Morris here. I really don't need to read the bio because I know him pretty dang well, but just so I don't screw anything up, I'll touch on some of the high points. So Brian, by the way, is one of the first people that I met when I moved here to Murfreesboro a few years ago. So it's nice to have him here. He's currently serving as the Constituent Service Representative for Congressman DesJarlais in our 4th District here. His prior role before what he's doing now was as the founder and executive director as the Rutherford County Veteran Community Center, which is right down the road. If anybody does not know where that's at, that's where a lot of our veteran groups, VFW, American Legion, DAV, all these other different veteran groups meet at. And so Brian spearheaded getting that building set up. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Citadel and a master's degree from Cumberland University in public service management. He also was at the has another master's degree from the United States Naval War College, a bunch of other fancy stuff that he's smart with. He's from Long Island originally and joined the Navy in 1992, where he was a hospital corpsman. For those of you that don't know, Marines and corpsmen normally get along pretty well because they take care of us when we hurt ourselves, which is pretty often. So Brian was a corpsman and then got his degree and got commissioned. He served in Operation Enduring Freedom. What year was that? 2002? 2003, I guess. Okay, so retired as a naval officer. Bunch of other stuff in here that's real good. 21 years of service. And he's married and has 2 sons, which we were just talking about because our kids are about the same age as well, so that's interesting. Anyway, so all sorts of other stuff I can read here, but it's real boring when I read it. So I'll let Brian get up here and talk about what he does. Thank you.
I've never been important enough to have a lapel mic. Can you guys hear me? Is it too loud? Sometimes I have a booming voice, I've been told, so if I'm over, let me know if I'm too loud. I think. Hello, thank you all for inviting me. Jeremy, thank you for inviting me. Randy, thank you very much. My name is Brian Morris, and thank you. This is the first time opportunity. I've never been to a Rotary meeting before, so thank you all very much for inviting me. The food was great. Thank you guys. This is a cool thing. A little bit about myself. So what Jeremy was saying. I moved here. We'll just start at the end, right? So I taught my last job in the Navy. I was an instructor at the Naval Academy from the last couple of years. And when I was at the Naval Academy, my wife, who I was also in the Navy, we met a couple of different times in my career. I broke my leg real bad, and she was my physical therapist. So at the hospital at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital in 1997. Didn't see her again until a Christmas party in Spain. We were wearing matching outfits. So I think at least one of my kids is supposed to be important. Who knows? Maybe the president is out there. So it was meant to be. She finished nursing school when I was getting ready to retire. So her best friend, when we were both in the Navy, worked at HCA. So we wound up, she got a job as a nurse at Summit in Hermitage, and we wound up moving to Mount Juliet. So I've been in Tennessee since 2013, so the longest I've ever lived in one place since I was 17 years old. So I'm not exactly a Tennessean yet, but I'm working on it. I have another 7 years, and then I'll have lived here longer than anywhere else on the planet. And then I moved here. My wife got a job at the VA hospital, so I moved here in 2018. I've been in Murfreesboro for 5 years. During that time, I've been involved in a bunch of different projects. John Calfee and I, and Andrea, I got involved in one of the first people I met was a gentleman from the VFW named George. He came, knocked on my door, and walked in my house as soon as I opened the door and told me, "Hey, you have to sign this. You're joining the VFW." Okay. And if anybody knows George, that's the way George would roll. And I was like, "Okay, well, George, just please don't die on my front porch. I'll sign whatever you want." So anyway, I got involved in VFW. That kind of got me into veteran stuff, and that led from George coming to my house to now that opened up a world of opportunity for me. So for that, I'm thankful to George. When I was involved with an organization called Community Service, And in that organization, we were instrumental in bringing the Vietnam Memorial Wall here. Anybody remember when we brought that here? So we were the organization that brought it here. Did anybody get to see that wall when it was here? Yep, Barfield, Christmas. They had a semi-truck that people left items at the wall in DC, and then they put some of those items on display on that truck. And one of them, which touched me deeply, was a pair of boots. They were just a pair of modern combat boots. And there was a note left by a Marine first lieutenant. And the note said something along the lines of, I came back, I wore these boots during my deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I came back to thank yous and love and appreciation and hugs. And you, to the Vietnam guys, came back to getting spit on and insulted. That's a debt we owe, the younger folks owe that generation, right? And I took that personally. So because of that, me and some other folks in the room created the Rutherford County Veteran Community Center, which is now the TriStar Veteran Center. TriStar Veteran Center? Veteran Resource Center. I'm not as involved anymore, so I got a job. Through that job, it led me to Congressman DesJarlais. So for the Congressman, I do a lot of constituent services. So when people have issues with mostly veterans who have issues with Social Security or with the VA or folks who have issues with Social Security, and they call their congressman, you're calling me, and then I liaison and try to help folks out. So it's a pretty good job, and it's been very rewarding. I was trying to find some information about the veterans in Rutherford County. There are, according to the Dominic Grimaldi, who's the Rutherford County Veteran Service Officer, between 12 and 14,000 veterans in Rutherford County who receive some sort of benefit from the VA, either disability payments or medical care or education benefits. But there's another 25,000 veterans who are not affiliated with the VA, for a total of around 40,000 veterans. Each one of those veterans, right, so that's a pretty big population out of a county, that's 10% of the county, more than 10% of the county, are veterans. And then those folks have families. So around, Dominic was telling me, around $250 million a year-ish impact on the local community from the veterans of Rutherford County. That's a lot, right? That's a substantial amount. This 10% of the vote, 10% of the population, and a lot of money. So a lot of resources. One of the larger groups is about MTSU, right? Saw the doctor a couple of seconds ago, and then there's another. Yep. So there's a handful of folks in here that are MTSU professors. There's about 12,000 students at MTSU that are veterans, and so again, around 10% of the population, maybe a little bit less than 10% of the 18,000. So it's a large community as well. That community is kind of divided up, mostly Vietnam-era folks, although the global war on terror vets are a close second, but as of the moment, it's still mostly Vietnam. There are still some World War II and Korean veterans about. In fact, on the 4th of May, the Tennessee State Home for Veterans on Compton Road is having a ceremony to honor 4 of those veterans, and it's open to the public. So if you would like more information after this, but they're honoring four World War II vets. One of them was a prisoner of war. He got captured right after the Normandy landings. He was a couple of days after D-Day. He landed, got captured, was a POW for 88 days, and then was liberated, one of the first camps. So he's got a fantastic story. And as those folks are all in their late 90s, those stories will go. There's another gentleman, Bill Allen. Yeah, anybody know Bill Allen? Right. So his story, he was on D-Day. He was a foreman like I was, and his ship got sunk out from under him. He's still spry. I see him every once in a while at different events. But again, those folks are starting to got transitioned out. But that's going to be an important event. So if you're free, Saturday, May 4th, again, I'll have more information I can give you all. Jeremy put out. Veterans come from all different walks of life. Right? They enlist or they become officers for all different people. It's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It's a family. There is no, we would say, we're all Navy blue or we're all Marine Corps green. There is no, those issues tend to go away when you see the best in folks. I think that's something that I appreciated from the military. you really get to appreciate, to know folks for who they really are, and the differences are so minor that we all share much more in common than we do apart. But veterans face many challenges, right? Challenges with the transition, because it is such a brotherhood. How many veterans are in the room? I should have asked this. Right? So thank you all for your service, and I'm sure you all would agree. The brotherhood that we shared in the military, the sisterhood, the family we shared in the military is just not the same in the civilian. So it's hard to find folks that you could really trust and think the same way. The mentality and the way we think in the military and in the civilian world is just completely not worse, one's not better than the other. It's just different. And that brotherhood and that sisterhood is hard. That's why there are 22 suicides a day. You go from such a tight-knit family, such a tight-knit community, to not having that. And that's really hard for folks to adjust. There aren't as many programs as you would think. The VA does its best, for sure. They're constantly pushing folks for mental help. But people are scared to ask. They're embarrassed. And it's a stigma. It's a stigma. Will I lose something if I go to the VA and talk to them about my issues, or if I go talk to a therapist? And it's a challenge to overcome. And most, again, this may be a little stereotypical, but most, folks when they enlist, or mostly back then anyway, it's different now, but a lot of young men are kind of taught to, suck it up a little bit. Certainly older generations of young men were taught to suck it up and not complain. And now you come back and you have all these feelings of loss and loneliness, missing that brotherhood. And that leads some of these, many folks, 22 a day, to commit suicide. So that's something that the VA is constantly trying to fight, constantly trying to overcome, the stigma of mental illness, but it is definitely a challenge. One of the other challenges that we have, veterans face are employment challenges, right? It's hard to find a job sometimes. You have all of these skills, but how does an infantryman relate to your company, right? And then there's the stigma of, I'm going to get someone who has PTSD. I don't want to deal with that, so I'm not going to hire them. So that's something that vets face on a daily basis, a challenge that they have to. And then, for a personal story, like I was a naval officer. That would have gotten me a job in Norfolk, but here in Tennessee, nobody knows what a naval officer does, right? So it's just something, so those skills they translate, leadership skills, but it's hard to translate that on a resume, the skills that you get while you're on active duty. So that's a challenge. Homelessness is always a challenge for vets. There are some plans that the VA is doing, or long-term plans at York, of making homeless, like the small houses type facilities. That's a long-term plan that they're working on, trying to get funding for, to build several compounds on York, kind of like where the golf course used to be, kind of in that area, to put some facilities on there for homeless folks. It's hard, right? So you could find housing for somebody. Rutherford County is very expensive, so maybe you find housing for someone in one of the outlying counties, but their job is here in Rutherford County, and there's not necessarily the mass transit to get from the outlying counties to Rutherford County or to Nashville, and that makes it a challenge. So you can put somebody up in a place with a place to live, but if they can't get transportation, then you're just putting a Band-Aid on it, and that's a challenge, right? Everything is so expensive now that it's difficult to overcome stuff like that. And transitioning to civilian life is hard. For the military folks, right, you go through a course called TAP, which is Transition Assistance Program. But it's sometime when I went through TAP, I really paid attention. I'd been in for 20 years. I was an officer. I knew. Like, I was out of work for 2 weeks. I was really focused, writing notes. I had no idea what I didn't know. I had no idea. The kid next to me took it as 2 weeks off of his shift, and he was hammered the entire time. He wasn't paying attention. He was drunk in the morning and then waiting to get home to get drunk in the afternoon. So he missed it all. He missed it all. I don't know. I don't know what happened to him, but he missed it all. And I missed most of it. I didn't know. And you only go through it once. Or you might be able to go through it twice, but you don't know what you don't know until you got out. I remember one of the first calls I made was to TRICARE, the military insurance company. And I was asking her insurance questions. What catastrophic happened? She's like, how do you not know that? My entire 21 years, it was $12 if I went to a doctor that wasn't on base. I have no idea what anything costs. So like that information was just lost on me because they told me to tap. And I was like, I probably don't need to know that. It's not important. Probably would have helped out. So there's a lot of stuff like that. So it's a challenge because you only do that once and then you can't get back on a base like I can because I retired. Jeremy can't get retired. But if you did 4 years and got out, you can't necessarily go back and ask those questions to folks that come. So that's a challenge that vets face. There is always programs that help. Recently, Congress passed the PACT Act 2 years ago. Congressman DesJarlais was a big supporter of that, voted for it, and that's the largest expansion of veteran benefits since like Agent Orange, since Vietnam era, post 9/11 GI Bill for medical. There's a lot of stuff that becomes presumptive. Burn pit exposures, a lot of different COPD and sinus issues from being in the desert, a lot of dust, a lot of stuff got burnt. So that's an improvement, right? It's still a challenge, but it's an improvement. But when they passed that act, they didn't fund new jobs at the VA. So like all of a sudden they passed this act, many million veterans, something like 7 or 8 million veterans submitted a claim, but they didn't have people to process those claims. So then you've had people waiting for a long time to get their claim processed. And it's not like people who just got out and didn't do the PACT Act claim weren't already making claims, and it was already a 9-month waiting list to get your claim processed, and now it's like 16 months. So a lot of folks very upset about that, and I get very many phone calls about that every day. But it's something that was a big deal, again, kind of like 6 or 8 months ago. They've sort of caught up. Now it's not as bad as it used to be, or the process is taking. So that's a plus, right? So they hired a whole bunch more folks, but that also meant maybe the quality wasn't as good as it was before, so there were some issues with getting it all kind of sorted out. But that's all kind of been tamped out. So that's a plus. So with that process, the vets, I get a lot of complaints. Not a lot. I get many compliments about the VA hospitals, the medical care they get at York and at National. I do get some complaints. Nobody's perfect. Some people have bad days. But overall, I've never had an issue there. Right? I think it's for the folks in here that use the VA, I've never had a problem with it, but some folks have. Another major program that the VA does is the GI Bill. So for MTSU, right, post 9/11 GI Bill provides folks education. That's how I got my master's degree, or one of them. So they can go to college. They can pass it on to their children, depending on there's some stipulations in that. So that's a plus. So I sent out a request to the different veteran groups for information that I could talk to you guys about, like to kind of like talk up their events. They're a little positive reflection on that. The only one that really replied to me was MTSU, so I'm going to tell you the 3 things they asked me to talk about before I forget. On May 2nd, they have what's called the Stole Ceremony, the Spring Stole Ceremony. So the graduating class, the veterans that are graduating, have it's a beautiful ceremony. It's at the Miller, where? Okay, it's at that's it. The education building, Miller Education Building, right up the block. It's not at the Coliseum. It's right up the road here. Yeah, on Bell Street. So they have it's a beautiful ceremony. If you have free time, it's at 10 o'clock. It's at 10 o'clock on Thursday the 2nd. All the veterans are there that are graduating. They all get presented a stole, so it's like a sash, right? They all get, it's a beautiful ceremony. It recognizes their service, tells you where they're going to go in their life. So it's a really beautiful thing. So if you have a chance, you should go see that. Also on 9/11 is the Remembrance Day. They have a big ceremony at MTSU for 9/11. And the Salute to the Troop game hasn't been decided, but that's usually a football game, and it is a football game, and it's usually November. And then the 7th annual Veteran Impact Celebration is like a fundraising dinner for them, and that's on August 16th. I have more information if anybody's interested. And I think the most important thing that veterans need to understand, you're not alone. So if you know any veterans in your life or run into veterans, they're not alone. There are, again, 40,000 of us here, and then 100 or 300 something thousand folks in Rutherford County who I'm 99% certain would love to talk to anyone that's a veteran, right? Would reach out and open their hearts to folks who needed help. I can't imagine anyone in this room, certainly based on your 4-way test, would not want to help someone who was in crisis, right? People make poor decisions when they're upset, possibly life-ending. So getting somebody past that critical moment, that critical decision, when they're at their lowest, That's what's important. And that could be their family, it could be their friends, it could be a stranger. Right? We bump into people all the time. Are we nice to them, or are we do we face life's adversities with hostility, or do we embrace it as I got cut off. Oh well, do I yell and scream and fuss in my car, or do you judge out? You do, right? Sometimes you can't help yourself, but that person might be having the worst day of their life too. So it's incumbent upon us to try to look above that, right? Trying to let that go. What are you gonna get the traffic light ahead of you 2 minutes slower? Not worth it. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. So thank you guys for inviting me to talk. You guys have any questions? Mm-hmm. So there are, I mean, the VA's, that's their biggest push, is to reduce veteran suicide. And there are a lot of, there's probably 100, maybe 1,000, probably thousands of nonprofits that do different things for different, right? There's a t-shirt company, not hockey t-shirts, but Till Valhalla Project, I think it's called. My wife's got a t-shirt from them. I have a t-shirt from them. And for every so many t-shirts, their objective, right? They sell t-shirts and then they bring plaques to victims or families of fallen. So again, to bring suicide awareness up, something. So I know there's a lot of nonprofits that deal with that. And then I know, like I said, the VA is huge on trying to reduce it. So they've made a lot of mental health. It's a challenge though, right? There are only so many mental health providers, and there's so many. It's hard to keep them on staff and whatnot. So it's hard. Sometimes there's a waiting list, and that's the critical moment, right? You have an issue, super upset. You could call the crisis line. And there is a crisis line that the VA puts out. But it's hard. There's a step in there to get help, right? Does that make sense? And that's the challenge. Mm-hmm. But getting somebody, the hard part is getting somebody to make that call. That's the hard part. And that's the really hard part. I went through a patch where I had some family issues. I went through a rough patch. And there was a moment where I was like, man, if my kids would find me laying here on the floor. I can't. I don't want them to see that, right? What was going on? And there was a moment where, a hard moment to think about it.
Get veterans a better sense of community within here in the local area?
That was the mission of the Veteran Center that we created, is to get the veteran groups are all individual groups. The American Legion, right? They all met different places. One of the goals was, let's make them all meet in one spot so we can impact veterans at a larger thing. MTSU kind of is the lead as the largest veteran group. They have the most money, and Daniel Center has a ton of resources. And you don't have to be a student to go to get aid. So any veteran go to the Daniel Center and get assistance for different things. And they're constantly doing veteran meetups, stuff like that. But I'm sorry, I don't have. The what? Oh, for sure, 100%. Yeah. No, please.
Tennessee, they reach out all across the country to make sure that they're helping any veteran that needs help.
They do. General Huber's a great guy. He can be a little brusque, but I like him. He works for me. I think he's great. Some of the college kids might not, because he's a retired 3-star. It's a big gap between an E3 and a retired 3-star. So thank you for your. Yes, Jeff.
Somebody calls you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It says they want to help. They're not a veteran, whether it's mental. They have heard you speak or heard others speak. What do you tell them?
So if they were calling me in my office, right? Like if they were calling me in my role as for the congressman, I would refer them to the Daniel Center. Actually, is what I would do. I would tell them to call Dr. Miller, because that would be a better place to put their resources. We don't run those kind of programs out of Congressman DesJarlais' office. That's not something we are able to do. But yeah, I would either that or Operation Stand Down. in Nashville. That's the other major veteran organization here in Rutherford, here in the middle Tennessee area. Those would be the two best places that I would refer folks to get it. And they would be able to, I think, those were good clearing houses for different activities. So I think that would be the route if you wanted to help, would be the spot that I would refer for. Locally, if it's a smaller thing, then the Veteran Center here up the block, Keith Prather is the chairman of that, so tell him to contact. Yes, sir.
At the VA hospital in Decatur, Georgia, so I have a soft spot for the VA, but I hadn't really had any ties to the VA in over 30 years, but just recently helped a veteran who really needed to transition to disability, physical disability. And we worked with the VA hospital. They were absolutely amazing. So whenever you talk to him, he was assigned basically a guidance counselor. I was kind of laughing about your story about the insurance, because we would say to James, do you know what benefits there are for you? I mean, he absolutely just kind of clueless.
Yeah.
Until he was assigned this counselor who was amazing, walked not only James through it, walked me through it, walked some other support members through it, got him secure housing, got him benefits he wasn't even aware he had available for him. So when you talk to the people in the VA, please let them know that they're doing an amazing job. And this young woman was a shining example of service above self.
And the VA has, in addition to medical care and education benefits and housing, the VHA loan and all that, behind Kentucky Fried Chicken and Tommy's Car Wash, Tommy's Express Car Wash, is a veteran center back there that's run by the VA, and they have occupational therapy and vocational therapy, and they can help you write your resume. I mean, it's not like just walk in and get, I like this. There's like a process to it, but so there's the problem. One of the problems with the VA, in my opinion, there are hundreds of programs that they have that could help veterans, right? But you have to find someone like that person who can guide you through the system, because the system is, it's a little bureaucratic, right? So it's hard to get, we'll say bureaucratic. So it's a challenge at times to get what you need. But if you can navigate that bureaucracy, and if you can navigate that bureaucracy with a positive attitude that makes people want to help you, you'll get all sorts of great stuff. It's just a challenge, and some folks get very frustrated. I get calls all the time. Oh, they're just waiting for me to die, so they don't have to pay me. No, that's not it. It's just the other thing, right, is the time from when you make a claim, right? So if you were a Vietnam vet, or even if you're a Vietnam vet and you're making a claim of something that happened to you 60 years ago, and it's not a presumptive, like I was exposed to Agent Orange and I have bladder cancer, that there's a link between those. But my knee hurts. Okay, like my knee hurts too. Like, how do you prove what 80-year-old's knee doesn't hurt, right? Everybody, right? Or my back. Okay, well, you have to prove to the VA that you got injured in Vietnam or while on active duty, and that nothing else happened to you at all, ever. You lived in a bubble for the last 60 years, and the only thing that ever happened to you was that injury that has to be in a medical record somewhere while you were, like, that's the challenge. A lot of folks don't get that. That it's not just, my back hurts. It must have been when I was in the military. I'd like money, please. That's not the way it works, right? Like, there's got to be a cause and effect, and it's a complicated process, and it's a legal process. So people are like, well, I submitted my appeal. Do you have new evidence? No, I just wanted an appeal. Well, it's going to be denied if you don't have new evidence. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what an appeal is. So anyway, you get a lot of that. But if you can navigate the system, it's a great thing. Yes, sir.
One of the guys that knees hurt.
Yes, sir.
Where would I find my medical records from the system?
Well, that's a tough one. All right, so that's a tough one.
That my knees hurt because of...
Yes.
That's just a hypothetical.
Hypothetical.
No one specific.
No one specific. So there is... all right, so that's a great question. The National Archives, in theory, should have your records, right? But it depends. There was a fire, and there's some stuff. Most of the records from the fire were World War II records. So it shouldn't be. They're in a separate spot. But it takes a while to get your records. Now, and then the records are also like, if you were sorry, this is probably too much information, but if you were seen at a medical hospital, right? So if you were at a medical hospital, then your records are not with you, your records are at that hospital. So they have to find that hospital's archives to get those records from your period of stay. So it's not easy. It is not easy. And they've done a much better job on the younger vets locking it all in. So most younger vets go through the process before they've even gotten out. So they know they're going to get disability at whatever percentage before they even get out. Or at least all of their records have been looked at and screened and submitted before they get out. It's much, much more difficult. You know, tinnitus. Oh, tinnitus. Okay. Oh, but I go hunting every weekend. Well, you know, the VA is going to assume that that is what caused your hearing loss, not you were in artillery in Vietnam, right? So that's just, it's a challenge. But the National Archives would be where you would go to request your record. And there's an online form you fill out. You could request. Sure. Sorry, I don't want to be taking up too much of your time. I know you have other stuff. Is there any other questions? Excellent. Thank you. Oh, yes, sir.
A standing position if someone else were to become our congressman?
No, unfortunately not. If somebody else becomes now they could keep me, Lynn and I, but we work for the congressman. I mean, House of Representatives work for the congressman. So if he does not get reelected, I will come to you for a job.